Her husband's family humiliated her at her baby shower, calling her a burden who trapped their son. She was 8 months pregnant, standing alone while 40 people laughed and recorded. Instead of celebrating new life, they gave her public shame. Instead of love, they gave her mockery. Instead of joy, they gave her tears she refused to let fall. But that morning, her late father's lawyer had called, and what he said changed everything. What happened next made every single tear worth it. Before we dive in, please subscribe and drop a comment with your city and the time you're watching. I love knowing where my incredible audience is tuning in from. Now let's begin. The crystal punch bowl caught the afternoon light, scattering little rainbows across the walls of the Harper Estate's sunroom. It should have been beautiful. 40 guests, pink and gold balloons, a table piled with wrapped gifts. Sophia stood in the center of it all, one hand resting on her swollen belly, the other gripping the small gold ring on her finger, her mother's ring, the one her father had kept safe for her after the funeral and pressed into her palm the day before his own passing. Hold on, the ring seemed to say. Just hold on. Sophia was 31, 8 months pregnant, and surrounded by people who despised her. Margaret sat at the head of the room like a judge at a sentencing. She was Dominic's mother, the kind of woman who made cruelty look like manners, who could strip someone of their dignity with a smile and a well-timed pause. She had organized this shower herself, not to celebrate Sophia's baby, but to make something very clear in front of witnesses. That morning at 7:14 a.m., Sophia's phone had rung. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, professional. "Mrs. Reyes, my name is Arthur Wynne. I was your father's attorney. He passed away knowing you would face moments like the one you're about to face today. He built something for you, a commercial real estate portfolio valued at $38 million, held in trust your husband and his family cannot touch. It was always meant for you. He made sure of that." Sophia had sat on the edge of the bed, one hand on her belly, listening to a dead man protect her from the grave. She had arrived at the shower anyway, because her mother-in-law needed to show her true face, completely, publicly, permanently. Margaret rose from her chair, and the room quieted the way rooms do when powerful people decide to speak. "I think we all know," she began, her voice smooth as polished stone, "that Sophia has never quite fit into this family, into Dominic's life, into the future we envisioned for our son." She paused, letting it land. "And now, with a baby coming, I feel it's time someone said what everyone is already thinking." Dominic sat beside his mother. He didn't move, didn't flinch, just swirled his glass and stared at the floor, not with guilt, but with boredom. "She trapped him," someone whispered near the window. "She's been living off the family for 2 years, said another. Margaret smiled. "Sophia, darling, what exactly have you contributed to this family, to my son's future, to anything?" Phones came out. Recording lights blinked on. Sophia stood still. Her hand moved to the gold ring. She pressed it against her palm the way her father had taught her. Feel something small and real when the world gets loud. Her father had told her stories about her grandmother, Elena, a woman who had survived a household that treated her like furniture, who had smiled at every insult and quietly, patiently built something no one could take. "Real power doesn't announce itself," he used to say. "It just arrives." Sophia had learned that lesson in pieces. At the school where teachers called her background disadvantaged. At the neighborhood where girls with less money were treated like they had less worth. At every dinner with Dominic's family where she was examined and found lacking before she even spoke. She had absorbed it all, filed it away, touched her ring, and waited. Dominic's sister, Priya, materialized beside her, wine glass in hand, voice low enough to be private and loud enough to be heard. "I genuinely feel sorry for the baby," Priya said, smiling at a cluster of women nearby. "Imagine having her as a mother, no connections, no pedigree, no real understanding of how things work." She laughed, brittle, performative. "Some people just aren't built for this life." The women around her nodded. One raised her glass. Sophia looked at her husband across the room. He met her eyes for exactly 1 second, then looked away. That second told her everything she already knew. In a black SUV parked at the curb outside, Arthur Wynne sat with documents on his lap and his hand on the door handle. He had considered walking in a dozen times. Each time he stopped himself. Let them be exactly who they are, Sophia's father had told him. On camera, in front of witnesses, every word they say is evidence of who deserves what comes next. Arthur watched through the tall windows as Margaret raised her glass for a toast. To family, Margaret announced. To those who belong. And to the wisdom to know the difference. The room clinked glasses. Someone near the back actually applauded. Arthur put his hand back in his lap. The documents Arthur carried contained more than financial statements. They contained the deed to the building Margaret's charity office operated from, owned by a trust now belonging to Sophia. They contained ownership records for the commercial property Dominic's firm used as its flagship address, leased unknowingly from corporations Sophia's father had been quietly acquiring for 11 years. They contained the title to the Harper family's lake house, the one Margaret treated as her personal sanctuary, purchased 3 years ago by a shell company that answered to Sophia's father. He had watched from a distance for years, seen the way they treated his daughter, said nothing, built everything. They will try to make her feel like she has nothing, he had written in his final letter to Arthur. Make sure she knows she has everything, and make sure they find out when it will hurt the most. Sophia blew out the single candle on her shower cake alone while 40 people watched. No one sang. Someone laughed at something that had nothing to do with her. She touched her belly. The baby kicked sharp and certain like a punctuation mark. I know, she thought. I know. Monday morning arrived like a verdict. Dominic's firm received notice that their lease agreement contained an ownership clause requiring tenant approval from a parent company. A company that had just transferred control to one Sophia Elena Reyes. The lease was valid. Access was not. Margaret arrived at her charity office to find a letter from the building management company, formal, polite, and devastating, informing her that the building had new ownership and would be undergoing a full review of all tenant agreements. Priya's boutique investment property, the one she bragged about at every dinner, had been held in a partnership trust she had never bothered to read. The majority stake had always belonged to Sophia's father. Now it belonged to Sophia. By Wednesday, Dominic called. His voice was different, smaller, careful. We need to talk, he said. Yes, Sophia said. We do. She met them all in a conference room on the 14th floor of a building with her name on the lease. Arthur stood behind her. She sat at the head of the table. She did not yell. She did not cry. She placed her hands flat on the table, felt the slight pressure of her father's ring, and spoke the way women speak when they have already won. You told 40 people I had nothing to contribute. You said it on camera, on social media, for the world to see. You were wrong, and now you know exactly how wrong. She slid 3 folders across the table, one for each of them. These are your options, not negotiations. Options. She didn't win that day in the conference room. She had won years earlier, the moment her father decided that his daughter's dignity was worth protecting, and that patience was the most powerful inheritance he could leave her. The baby was born 6 weeks later. A girl. Sophia named her Elena, after a woman who had survived everything and built something no one could touch. If this story moved you, if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you most, drop a comment below. Tell me your moment. And subscribe because the next story is even more powerful than this one.